Welcome to Redeeming Sheep Productions. Today we're talking to Elijah and why he left Light of the World Gospel Ministries.
Well, hello. Yes, my name's Elijah, and it's been an interesting couple months, more than a couple months. It's been interesting, almost 6 months, I would say, over 6 months. But it's been, very interesting experience. I'm a former media team manager at Light of the World. I was there. Started on the media team like more of a full-time gig around 2019. I'll kind of give a little bit of my testimony beforehand, I guess. So, the family and I, we traveled a lot. This is my mom, and you already know her from the previous video, but we we traveled a lot of our lives. Um, and then my dad passed when I was about 13, and at that time we were settled in Walt Hill, Nebraska, and Light of the World was our church, and and as a rebellious little man, kind of. Um, I went to church because mom wanted me to, and dad wanted me to, and then kept going or whatever. But I didn't want to go to Light of the World just because of there's like I knew that when they would talk about Jesus saving our sin and saving us from our sins, and that we don't want to be doing all those evil things, and getting things I shouldn't have got into. But yeah, so I didn't want to go to. I didn't mind going to the regular services a lot of the world, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But when it came to youth camp, I really didn't want to go because I felt very convicted at that time. And anyway, so fast forward a little bit. So I am now 16. No, I'm 15 years old, and I was in my bathroom, and God was convicting me about the sin I was doing. And I was like, well, and He asked me a question. God asked me a question, like, hey, do you want your sin or do you want me? And it's not verbal, but it's just kind of presented to you that way. And I was like, well, Lord, I want you. I finally admitted that because I was scared of hell before. I didn't want to go to hell, but I also wanted my sin too. And yeah, after that, I actually like, Lord, yeah, I want you. And He saved me then in the bathroom of our house in the middle of the night. You just never know when the Lord's going to save you. Um, And so yeah, that was interesting. And eventually, I went back and forth. I went back into sin, and got back out again. The Lord took me out again, and then yeah, and it was an interesting experience. But I'm glad God saved me. But that was something very interesting. So after I was born again, so I'm in Light of the World. I can remember pretending to be a Christian in Light of the World. This is important for later on. But I remember going around, and before I was saved, I had like a Bible bag, and I would talk the talk, like, oh yeah, all the cliches of Christianity, and all the verbiage that a lot of the world used, I would use. I really thought that it was a real true church and all that stuff. I just didn't want to be there because I wasn't saved. But then I remember after being born again, there was a gentleman who was a part of the youth, and he came up to me. He's like, "You're getting baptized for the second time?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm getting baptized for the second time." Like, man, I thought you were saved. I thought you were born again. Like, no, I wasn't. I was faking it. Um, and then after that, it was after getting baptized the second time. First time was before I was born again. Second time after. Just kind of just grew up in like Light of the World. So starting at you know 15, I'm born again. And just growing up in Light of the World, going to youth camps, and um, going to the Sunday services and Tuesday Bible studies and the Wednesday youth group during the school year. And yeah, so I was just doing that, and that was in around 2016. All the way up to 2019, I went on a missions trip to out of country, and it was a very and it was an interesting time for me. It was just I had my ups and downs. I started around 2017, though. I started getting like I would say, not to make it like anything scary or weird, but like I felt like it was like almost an uphill battle being a Christian, like where it was like it felt like It was a lot of mental struggles, a lot of spiritual struggles, a lot of like, feels like Satan was like attacking me, but like in a different way. It was I didn't think it was because of anything to do with light of the world. I didn't think it had anything to do with that. I didn't think it had anything to do with the preaching at Light of the World. I didn't think it had anything to do with Paul Malcolmson. I had no idea the eldership board there. I had no idea, or like even just my own personal thing. I didn't know how to decipher what was me personally struggling, what was, me trying to be a Christian, God sanctifying me. It was like very confusing time right after, around from 2017 to 2019 was a very, very difficult set of years for me, and it got worse and worse. And um, I started feeling like fearful I wasn't doing what the Lord wanted me to do. So like I'm a Christian, but now I'm starting to feel like I'm not preaching the gospel enough. I'm not inviting people to church enough. I'm not, I'm not getting maybe like it's weird legalistic stuff like, oh, I shouldn't be doing these types of video games, maybe watching these types of movies or whatever. And I can overthink a lot. That's kind of some of the things I can do. But it was a very difficult time. And not having a father there, you want him there, you want to ask him questions, and he's not there. That was also a very difficult thing. My mom loved me. There was a book she was reading that got me more legalistic. It wasn't her fault. It was just the book. And
it was Intercessor, by the way. We got it from a couple when we went on our mission trip. But yeah, we read through Intercessor.
Yeah, and one of the things is that it was not an autobiography, it was a biography. And that's one thing I didn't like about the book, is I felt like they were really praising a man, and they weren't really praising God. They were talking about how this man was holy, and it was an intercessor for the Lord and all this stuff. It was like over-focused on a dude. And I was receiving it a certain way, and it was about a testimony of this guy's life. But some of the things he did wasn't lining up with Scripture, but I thought, well, if this is the man of God, this is stuff that would really get me struggling for a week, overthinking it, whatever. But one of the things he did in there was he finally got married, he was getting older, got married, had a kid with this woman who was just there by his side the whole time, just loved him. And then he felt like the Lord wanted him to leave his kid behind, and he should leave his kid behind in Europe, and they should go down to Africa and whatever. I don't know. It was like a lifestyle change or what. I don't know if they were doing a mission down there, whatever. His example was that the Lord convicted him about was when he was reading, Abraham and Isaac, and God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and so this is part of his sacrifice to follow the Lord. And very confusing for me. That hit me hard because I didn't understand the differentiate between everything. Like, well, God also says if you don't provide for your family, you're worse than an infidel. All these things. I didn't know how to rightly divide any of this stuff. And besides, it's funny because God stopped Abraham from killing Isaac because Isaac wasn't good enough. Isaac wasn't good enough. Isaac and Abraham was the representation of God and Jesus, but it was only a picture and it was tainted. And God was trying to write Scripture. And there's other things he was trying to do too, but it wasn't because he wanted Abraham to kill his son. That wasn't the point. And so that was very difficult for me. There's little things like that. Paul Malcolmson would preach. He never preached anything on that. It was just a book separate from everything that a friend gave us when we were on the trip. But like stuff like that and the sermons would be confusing for me because I'm like, you want to be sold out for God or you want to be on fire for God. I didn't know what that meant. Does that mean like me going on a pilgrimage or me doing this or that? And then, it was very confusing. That was 2017, 2019, super confusing time. I started breaking down at the youth camp 2019, just falling to bits, falling to pieces, being so confused, so scrambled, not knowing the direction I'm supposed to go, what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. I'm being legalistic about so many things. And I'm not fully like understanding why. I'm thinking this whole time it's just me and I'm not listening to the Lord hard enough, or I'm not hearing the Lord right, or this voice that would come ahead, it's hard to, is this the Lord or is this from Satan? And I didn't know. It was super, 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 super hard and confusing. And then, I'm at a youth camp and I'm breaking down, and Paul Malcolmson has to slap me over the head. Basically, he didn't really do that. It was just like, it's a metaphor. If you get like, hey, he's like, Elijah, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? I don't know. I'm just like I'm breaking down. I said, well, there's, the cross, and you could just get at the cross at the youth camp. And he's like, just like leave your burdens there and just be in the victory or whatever. Leave the burdens there, and then just like let the Lord forgive you. You're free or whatever. And I tried, and it didn't work. And like I just felt the same way. I got a little bit better leaving the youth camp, but I didn't. There's just so much heaviness on me. And I remember it was like 2 weeks after that, Paul Malcolmson gave a sermon. It was about how God's burden is easy and His yoke is light. And then I was like, okay, well that's the truth. And I was like set free and felt so light. And I felt like I'm actually forgiven. There's no pressure on me or anything. I didn't feel confused for probably about a month. And then after that, it got more confusing again. I didn't really know. It got really strange for me. I didn't know what I thought. The Lord wasn't pleased with me. I felt like, well, maybe we should be doing this and that and the other. And so that happens in 2019. 2020 rolls around. We have the whole COVID scare fiasco. We have the whole whatever. During this time, I remember when the COVID scare hit. I remember I was in the living room. My mom got a call from Paul Malcolmson, and then he's like talking to her, and my mom would be running around the house, like from one room to another, or she would be talking. They were talking like I don't know how long, but it's like for me, sometimes it felt like an hour or more, and I didn't know at the time. I didn't know that she was talking to Paul Malcolmson. He was actually accusing her of things and tearing her down and like telling her to stop talking about the whole COVID thing because she's causing whatever division or whatever's going on. And I didn't know that at the time, but all of a sudden she'd get off the phone or she get called up to his place to come back and she'd be crying like, oh no, it's good, but it's she'd be crying. It was really confusing. I didn't know. I wasn't really paying attention then. And then I don't know if you want to elaborate in this little phone calls a little bit from that COVID time at all.
Yeah,
just kind of do a
I
slow
didn't
recap.
want you guys to think that like Paul was bad or anything like that, but they were intense conversation. Really just him just trying to control me actually, but I didn't know that at the time. And I just needed to learn something. So yeah.
That's what you thought? He's just trying to get you to teach you something?
I just apparently needed to learn something. It was really confusing. And then I was really pacing and trying to not share things in earshot if there was a moment I was going to say anything where the kids could hear. And then it's just hard you don't know how long the conversations go, so it's hard to just stand in one place too. And yeah, you didn't know didn't know what to expect on the other line. So yeah, by that time I was dreading calls or texts from him. Yeah. So I didn't know if I was going to be in trouble or not, or what it was going to consist of. Yeah. So.
And that was interesting too. So like that's going on. And at this time, one of the things that had good, clear thinking was, I remember we had the election in 2016. I didn't really care about politics before that. I started getting into it, but I really didn't get hardcore into politics until the COVID fiasco happened, until the whole people were getting locked down, the weird stuff on the news. So it started in like 2016 with that election. I was so surprised. Oh, Trump won. And then moving on, it was like in 2019/2020, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I was trying to look into all this stuff, get more research and everything. Starting to get plugged into some social medias and like Prager University and stuff like that. And I'm going through all this, and I'm starting to see clearly on the political side. And so that was interesting. So I had some structure, I should say, on the political side. So when this is happening, and Paul Malcolmson is telling us, to stay home, and or like the gathering groups, we're not meeting at the church, at the building that we had downtown. It was kind of confusing, but like I'm talking to my mom, and she's talking to us, and that's something we can actually talk about and like be clear on this stuff. And we're like, basically, I came to the conclusion, along with my mom, that this is not how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be gathering together as a body, not being separate. And this was something where first, I think this is probably the first thing that I had a major disagreement with Paul Malcolmson. But I thought, well, he's trying his best or whatever, but I still don't agree with it. And then you see, like, John MacArthur's was open up, and he got a lot of backslack from that, but he kept his open because it's the church. It doesn't close. God doesn't ever closes. But the building is not even the priority. The priority is like, well, we're Christians. We meet up anyway. Like, it's not something that we just stop meeting because there's a sickness going around or because the government tells us to or because our pastor tells us to. That doesn't mean you have to listen to that. Because if the Bible tells you to fellowship much more as the day draws near, then you fellowship much more as the day draws near. But that was something very interesting. So that was like one of the first things. 2020, we're in the middle of it. Paul Malcolmson invites me up for just a regular meeting. We would catch up like, there was a time we were doing it like once a month, but like it was like random sporadic times of the year we'd catch up. I would tell him like what I'm going through, what I'm struggling with, what girls I'm interested in, what my direction, what jobs I should get, directions, just all this stuff because I'm thinking, he's a mentor, all these things. And well, the issue with that is I go up there and I just read a verse that morning about how I forgot what book I was in, but about how like building the house, let's build the house of the Lord. Let's be faithful to building the house of the Lord, or whatever. It was like a mandate from the king or whatever. And so I go up to his place and he's talking. We're doing our third catch up thing, and he's like, "Hey, I have something I want to mention to you. I was wondering if you could start a live stream. We could start a live stream because everybody's put away. We're not meeting up at church anymore." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure. I guess we can." And he's like, "Well," he said, what did he say? He said, like, "Did you want to be faithful to the house of the Lord," or something like that. And then I'm like, "Well, I kind of read something similar to that in the Bible reading this morning." He's like, "Oh, show me." And then I showed him the verse I read that morning. And he's like, "Oh, that's confirmation that you're supposed to be here and that you're supposed to do this and that you're supposed, it's the will of God," or whatever. I don't remember the exact words he used. Basically, this is the confirmation that the Lord wants you to do this. All right, cool. Excellent. All right, let's get going. So I think we're in the midweek, and he wants me to do it that Sunday. So this is like a get it done right now type of thing. And I was used to that when it came to a YouTube channel I used to have with one of my friends. And all right, cool. So we set it up. We do it. It's kind of wonky the first time, and the second time it's better. The third time it's really good. The fourth time it's pretty solid. And then we're going week after week. Then we had Tuesdays to that. We're doing the live stream all the time. We were doing it for how long? I don't even know how long. We started in I don't even know how long. It doesn't really matter. We're doing it for months at a time. We were doing a lot. And then eventually we start meeting outside across the street because the church owned land across the street, which is where they're building the new building now. It was just a blank lot though. And we were meeting across the street in a tent, and I'm up with the live stream, and you're starting to see my face more often because I'm helping out, whatever. And so I'm getting really integrated. And eventually I start like taking over different things. I start just doing a bunch of the videos. I start producing the CDs, the DVDs, start editing videos. I start, uploading in the YouTube channel running, like in full force, upgrading the website. I mean, it is just going. It starts in 2020 and it keeps going like this. And I'm doing pretty fairly okay. There's times I get really condemned, but there's times it's like I'm doing okay. It's like kind of in and out, and really struggling. One of the main struggles though, is this what God wants me to do? For some reason, I would always feel like it wasn't. It was but I wanted to. I'm like, well, that is Satan doing that because Satan doesn't want me to do the will of God. There's always a battle whenever you're doing the will of God. That's what Paul Malcolmson would say. But then he would also say the next week, he would say that one Sunday, and then the next Sunday he would say like, well, if it's the will of God for your life, what you're doing, it'll be smooth sailing. It was very conflicting and very like difficult, and my mom and family would have a discussion like this. Isn't that kind of confusing? That how is it one week and I just reconciled it in my brain like, oh well, it's just he's saying the truth. It's just two different ways. It's just like if you're in the will of God, sometimes it's easy. If you're in the will of God, sometimes it's hard. It just depends on how you look at it, kind of thing. I reconciled the situation. Well, so I'm doing this, right? And the workload of the media stuff, I'm willing to take it on. I'm eager, I'm determined. I have my own job I'm doing on the side as well, and it becomes a full-time thing. I mean, eventually I'm also working on Paul Malcolmson's computer because it breaks down. We get everything all fast and speedy in there. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going over to his house, going up to his office, and just we're talking, we're working on stuff. This whole time, I'm like not seeing who Paul Malcolmson really is. I'm just here, and this is just we're just it's the pastor. You go up to his house or whatever, and you help him work on these things. I think what's very interesting to point out this whole time is that because I didn't have a dad, I didn't really see him as a father figure. It was really weird. I more saw him as like a spiritual, like, guider and protector, and like, because he was he was the person that was there when my father passed away and was promising our family that he would be there for us. If we needed anything or whatever. But I'm not seeing clearly to the point like where I'm not seeing the faults of this man. I'm not seeing the evils of this man. I'm not seeing him as a man. And I'm seeing him as my pastor, my, superiority, whatever. And so this whole time, I'm really close to him or whatever. He would call to, hey, if we needed something, I would just run over to his house. This is when I lived in Walt Hill. He had a lot of requests. And that's the thing. He said, oh, hey, I have some, but if you can't come up here, it's okay, but whatever. He may or may not put a patch on it. Like I say patch on it, like he would make it like, he's like, oh, I need you over here, but if you can't come over here, that's okay. Sometimes he would do that. Other times he would say, I need you over here. His thing's not working, and like, okay, I would rush over there because I was in town. Because I was there, at any moment, I would go up there and help on his media stuff all the time, whether it's his computer, his website. I was also helping with his other websites he had. He has a Evangelical Truth website, which is about secret societies that he exposed over there in Northern Ireland or whatever. I take care of the church's websites, and I'm just going over there, anything he needs help with. Sometimes we would have dinner with them, their family. Sometimes I'd have meetings with them. It was a very normal thing for me to be in Paul Malcolmson's home and to, talk to his boys and his girl and just talk to all of his kids, and even to say, hey, how's his wife doing? Just say hi to her and all these things, and she's cooking dinner, and it was just a normal thing. I wasn't thinking anything of it. I just thought this is great, all that stuff. And yeah, eventually though, what happened was I became so involved in the media team stuff to the point where I'm starting to get overwhelmed. I'm taking on more and more. It's both me and also I'm not noting that Paul Malcolmson is doing this. It's a theme that happens in Light of the World. You'll get stuck in there and you'll think it's everything because getting support and all this stuff, but I wasn't getting paid for any of it, and there was no compensation for really any of it. The only time I would be like once a year, maybe get like $100 or $120. He just says a thank you or whatever from the church, but and one of the things he would say is that when we get in the new church building, you have a full-time job. That's what I envision you, Elijah. I envision you there and working on the media team, working at full time in this ministry, and imagine just like your job is serving the Lord and serving His people and serving the church, and and it sounds really good, but there's no like date for when any of this is going to happen. And then eventually I transitioned jobs over to another job in the city now. So now I'm traveling back and forth from the city to Walt Hill, and it's getting a lot. It's very hard to balance everything. And then eventually, because of my job, I move to that city and I get away from Walt Hill, and I'm still working on the church's media stuff. I have my own job, and I got my own family, and I like not my own family, but like my family right here. I'm not married and have kids or anything, but
It's available.
available, but my immediate family, and it's a really crazy thing. And so I'm doing all this stuff and I'm thinking it's great, and I'm starting to get a system going where I work on it so many hours in the evening and on the weekends. There's times though I would work 6 hours on the church's stuff on the weekends and all that stuff. And not to mention Paul Malcolmson's thinking all these big visions for all these new websites he wants to host. We do a complete upgrade from the ground up of the website, from the old to the new. new programs, a whole new a new server host. We get new domain names. It is absolutely crazy. We start from the ground up, and it's basically a very slim team. There was me, and there was a couple people doing things here and there, but it was basically me. And he would ask for things, whatever. Eventually, to the point where I was doing stuff so often and so smoothly, to the point where he would only call up and ask him personally. He needs help with his own website he was managing, and then the new website he was making. And so I would be doing the church's stuff and then help with his stuff, all remotely. I remember during this time that I go over to his place, have a meeting after moving. I didn't have a meeting with him about moving, and it was a gap, probably 6 months, no, 4 months, probably 4 months. We didn't talk after I moved to the city, like up at his place. We were communicating otherwise. But finally went up to his place and had a meeting with him, got to catch up. And he told me, yeah, hey, I moved to, just in the middle of the conversation, yeah, I moved up to the city, and I'm getting, I have a job up there, obviously, and it's been going good or whatever. He's like, oh, you moved to the city. Oh, I wish I knew that before you did that. I wish you wouldn't have ran it across me before you moved. He was quiet after that, and I'm looking. I don't know how to process that. I'm like, okay, that's strange. Well, I'm like, well, I just didn't think it was. I just, had the opportunity, and I went for it. And didn't really go any further after that. We just kept on our conversation. But this is where it gets very interesting. This is when I think all the pieces start falling into place. During this time, I don't know, it's probably 2022 and around 2022 now. And I'm settled in a job in the city. I have an apartment in the city. And I'm still going to all the services as much as I can in a lot of the world. And I get hit with these random, like, really depressed states. And there's a gentleman one of my really good friends, and he was, encouraging me in any one of these dark times. And that was and I remember it was December 2022. I go through a super, super, super dark time. And to the point where I'm in my apartment, and it just comes out, it kind of grows on me, and it's like the same legalistic, same like oppressive, same like confusing, like, I don't know what you want to call it, but I felt that all over me. And the room became dark, like darker, like kind of like when you get out of focus on the camera, it kind of get darker, dimmer. I'm sitting in my living room in my apartment, and I just want to die. I don't even, there's not necessarily anything like sins in my life that are causing this to really happen. It's just, it's just so dark. I don't feel like there's any hope. I don't feel like I'm pleasing the Lord. I just want to die. It was very, very dark. And I remember a good friend called. I said, I need help, man. I don't know what's going on. He called. He's like, hey, he just started praying for me. And then he just sat there and listened. And then he's like, I don't know what to do. And then God reminded me of a verse. Because he did God, so through his prayers, and God reminded me of a verse like, he says, "Be still and know that I am God." And like we hear that term, but if you read that verse and keep going, he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth." Because I would put so much pressure on me to be like, I felt that I had to talk to these people, or this voice would come in my head and tell me to talk to these people, or talk to that person, we would hear a sermon from Paul Malcolmson saying, invite people to the house of God because we'd have a service once a month about cater, and it's an evangelistic service. Like, you get them in the house of God, sometimes you'd have flyers or whatever, and then I'll preach the gospel to them. And there's a lot of pressure to do that. And he would say that like Tuesdays and Wednesdays, like you're in Walmart, you're talking to them about the Lord, talking to them about the gospel, all these things. But it was just like, for me, it was overwhelming because I didn't know how to, every time I went to Walmart, I was paranoid about like, well, I need to talk to these people about the Lord. Maybe they need to know the Lord, And so that was very difficult. So all that's like on me at that one moment, like it's all just overwhelming me. And I'm just like, I can't save these people. And that verse comes through. God, like, I'm just like uplifted. Like, you know what? The Lord said, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted on the earth." Like, and that's an Old Testament thing. It's like the pressure doesn't say that, and you must do this in order for it to happen. It doesn't. That verse doesn't say that. And it's like, okay, and there's also other verses like the Lord's the Lord of the harvest. Pray that the Lord sends more harvesters into his field. And God commanded us to go out into the world and preach the gospel to all men. But that was a command that he gave. And how that looks is something that the Lord determines for people. It's not what we think it needs to be for other people. It isn't like we think, because evangelism is a certain way, that we think that they have to do it that specific way. Like talk to people at Walmart about the 4-step gospel or whatever it is. Like, I think we forget that the gospel is actually Christ himself. It's not a thing. It was just we make it a thing. Oh, well, it's the gospel, and we have to preach the gospel, and it's the Great Commission. And it's just like, I'm not mocking. When I say that, I don't mean to be mocking against the actual, like, there is, like, it is a Great Commission, and it is the gospel. But we've narrowed it down, I think, in America to something where it's, at least in light of the world, it was narrowed down to a point where, and my mind is interpreting it in a way to the point where it's like it has to be a certain way, and you have to basically the gospel comes down to inviting people to church, and then the gospel gets preached there, and then they get saved. That's the thing. And it's not what it is. I mean, the Lord guides us and he directs us, and he's going to seek and save that which is lost. He does it. He's going to find every lost sheep. It's not, the pressure's never on his people to literally save everybody. We don't save anybody. God saves everybody. He's the only one that does that. So that's all there, and God sets me free from that. And that was probably the darkest dip I've had, one of the darkest dips I had during that time in December 2022. My friend was rejoicing with me after I got the victory. And then moving forward, it's like 2023 at Light of the World was one of the strangest years for me being there, because I felt like the Lord has worked so much legalism and so much condemnation, so much confusion out of me, to the point where I start to become numb. I feel like I'm becoming numb in the services at Light of the World. I'm starting to get a lot more bolder about some of the stuff that he would say that I disagree with. I'll be in the middle of service. My sister will be sitting right next to me. I'm like, I don't agree with that. And then she's like, yeah. Or she'll just listen, like nod her head or whatever. Or she would say something to me, yeah, I don't know, that's kind of funny what he did up there. I'm like, yeah, it's funny what he did. I don't know why he did that. So there's quote unquote less reverence. But it was interesting because I started to see clearer. I'm like, well, I don't agree with him on that. One of the things he would say, and it's on the videos on their YouTube channel, is one of the things he would always say is he's like, well, you want to be in the front row of heaven. You want to be like the 30-fold, the 60-fold, the 100-fold Christians. You want to be in the front row of heaven. So you want to be able to do your best for the Lord. And that's legalism too, I believe. So that's what was interesting. And first of all, there's no verse that talks about, as far as I know, about the front row of heaven. He's talking about corn, 30, 60, and 100-fold. Farmers know this, that you try your best with every crop to get the 100-fold, but it doesn't always happen. There's nature, there's a type of seed, there's how dry it's been, how wet it is. There's a million other things. I'm not a farmer, so there's a million other things that contribute to whether your corn is full or it's only 30-fold or at all. So
You just said it depends on God. They really are. That's been fun going to Light of the World, from being from California and then being around farmers, is we're literally praying for each harvest with them.
the rain and stuff,
Yeah.
like, it's important.
Yeah. We're so dependent on the Lord. It's awesome.
Yes. And so that was interesting. Little things like that. I don't think I understood that. Those little things of me, like, oh, I don't agree with Paul Malcolmson on that. I don't agree with Paul Malcolmson on this. I felt more free to do that. We were doing that, at my family's place. We're going and we're talking to the same thing. And it was, and one of the things I was noticing is that whenever Paul Malcolm would talk about, like maybe in a sermon, maybe are you like right with the Lord, which is right. I didn't know if he was talking about salvation there, right with the Lord, or like if you messed up and you're like not right with the Lord. Because every time I would feel guilty, I was not right with the Lord, and so I would think that was me. Eventually, in 2023, it became where it's like I was just like, oh, that's for them. Paul Malcolm is preaching to them, and all these other people. That's not me. And that was one of the only ways I could cope with that. It's the only way that I could cope with being there is saying that was for somebody else. That's not for me. But it caused like a numbness. Because one of the things he would preach on is like, you just go to church and, go throughout the week and you never reach out to anybody or whatever. But that I would kind of have to put, okay, well, the Lord will guide me to somebody who he wants to talk to. If he wants to talk to somebody, he'll guide me there, and then he'll have the door open. Because I've had those doors open, and it was like peaceful talking to those people at work or even at Walmart randomly. And it's just like, it just happens. God opens the door, you talk, and it's over. And like the Lord opened the door, and so you see fruit. I never saw anybody get saved right in front of me, but it was just like that was what it was. And so in 2023, I'm just going through church. I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, okay, that's not for me. That's for me. That's good. That's good. That's good. Good. I don't really care about that. And like, I'm starting to critically think through all of these sermons now, and I'm talking to my family and all these things, and I'm starting to feel pretty relaxed throughout the weeks or whatever. Now, this is like last year at Light of the World before I left, and it was just smooth cruising, it seemed. And one of the people that really helped, though, is the cultish from Apologia Studios, which is a media branch off of Apologia Church down in Arizona. Their podcast actually helped me to critically think through a lot of this stuff. But the whole time, guys, I'm not knowing I'm in the cult that cultish is talking about. I'm not part of the Mormon Church. I'm not part of any of the apostates and all these things. I'm not part of the Catholic Church. I'm a part of a Church of God, and this is the men of God, and they're spending all day on, like the pastor Paul Malcolmson. He would always say he spent all day on Saturday, like trying to receive a message from the Lord, and when he got the message from the Lord, he would write it out and he had to preach it to himself, and then he had to slave and labor all Saturday just to get a sermon for the Lord, and on Sunday he would preach it to us. And then he's like, sometimes he would say, I preach it to myself or I'm preaching it to you. So I'm thinking, like God's like has these people that he's anointed, and he's like special anointing. That's called a special anointing, and they're like meant for that specific position. I'm like, that's why I was so afraid to preach anything, talk about anything at youth group or whatever, because I felt like if I said it wrong, this is not going to be anointed by the Lord. This is not. I can cause people to go one way or the other, apparently. And so all this legalistic stuff. That's why I didn't want to preach or whatever.